Welcome to the basic Scrum practitioner training. This training is brought to you by scrumlands.org. So Scrumlands is an organization which work closely with teams and organizations to achieve empirical agile processes so that they can deliver projects uh, consistently with predictability and transparency. Generally, when people implement Scrum, the first question I ask them is, what is your velocity? So majority of the teams, they operate Scrum without knowing their velocity. And without velocity, predictability is impossible. And one of the root causes for this is lack of proper understanding of Scrum. So this video lesson is for all practitioners of Scrum who wants to get trained in Scrum properly before embarking on the Scrum journey. This is a free video lesson, and if you want to convert this into a certification program, that is also possible. For that, you'll have to complete the quizzes, and at the end of this lesson, there is a small assessment comprising of 25 questions. So if you complete those things with the minimum pass mark, that is 80%, then you'll be eligible for a course completion certificate, which is equivalent to one PDU. Anybody who wants to understand Scrum in its entirety as per the Scrum guide will get value from this video lesson. My name is Ebrachan, and I worked and currently I'm still working with organizations, small organizations, medium-sized organizations, and very large enterprises, helping them to really achieve the real value the agile practices can provide, provided they are implemented properly. So let us get into the lessons. As discussed already, there are 4 quizzes embedded into this video and a final assessment comprising of 25 questions. So if you are looking for a certificate at the end of this video lesson, then you'll have to complete these things. So you'll have to attend like a student. Maybe you can have your notepads ready, and as we progress, you can take your own notes, and whenever you have doubts, you can rewind it, and if you have any doubts, you can post just a comment to this video. I'll reply, I'll answer those queries as well. Let us take a look at the project management frameworks currently available. So we have 2 types. We have the predictive styles and the adaptive or agile styles. Under predictive, we have waterfall, which is generic. So the waterfall model can be applied for even construction projects. They have a kind of waterfall. IT projects, many of the IT projects also follow waterfall. So it is very generic in nature. And we have the adaptive or agile styles, where there are n number of frameworks under the adaptive or agile styles. The Scrum is there, test-driven development is there, feature-driven development is there, extreme programming is there, scaled agile, DSDM, and there are a few more. Out of this, Scrum is the most popular one because that is very generic. It can be applied across multiple domains, whereas all other things are suitable only for technology projects, especially IT. So in this video lesson, we will be delving more and more into Scrum. And whatever we are talking here, that's all based on the Scrum guide by Ken Scaber and Jeff Sutherland. This is a classical waterfall model. In a waterfall model, we have different phases which are staged one after the other. First, we start with requirements and then we move on to design. And once the requirements are approved, then we move on to design. And once the design is approved, we move on to construction. And once the construction is done, then we get into testing. And after that, we get into the commissioning mode as well. And all these waterfall models, they revolve around plan, do, check, and act. That means whatever we want to do, we must plan first, and then we do things as per the plan. And once in a while, we check to see whether things are going as per the plan. And if there is a variance, we take action. So that I hope you understood the essence of a waterfall model. Here the problem is, okay, now the requirements are frozen here and approved here. And when new requirements comes in, it will have an impact on the design. So you have to raise a change request, impact analysis. So a requirements related defects, if it is getting close within the requirement phase, it is going to cost you only $1. But if it is the requirements related defect, if you are going to close during the design phase, it is going to cost you 10. And during construction, if you are trying to take care of a requirements related defect, it will be 100 times. So this as a so that progresses. The magnitude of the rework increases as the phases as we advance in the phases. So it is not that okay to keep on changing things if you are following waterfall model. Then we have an iterative or incremental approaches or adaptive or agile approaches where we progress in the project through iterations, and for every iteration we'll have a little bit of planning and then we do things, and then we study. At the end of the iteration we do a retrospective and we study and put the corrective and preventive actions in place. Then we move on to the subsequent phases. So at the end of every iteration, there is a demo to the client so that they get more insight. And with all those added wisdom and knowledge about the process as well as about the product, we move on to the next iteration. Again, there is a planning for the iteration. Then we do and study and act. So the basic difference between the waterfall model and the iterative or incremental approaches is here everything revolves around an iteration, and waterfall model is always on plan, do, check, and act. Whereas here in the iterative models, it is about plan, do, study, and act. So here we proceed with the assumption that requirements will change, and this model will help us to accommodate changed requirements even late in the project. Now, when to go for agile? See, there are two parameters. One is the scope clarity, and the other one is the familiarity with the technology. If the scope clarity is very low and the familiarity with the technology is also very low, then the agile will give us the maximum benefit. But at the same time, the scope clarity is very high, and if the familiarity with the technology is also very high, then waterfall models will work. But then most of the new product development and IT projects, and maybe even the architectural phase and the engineering phase of even EPC projects, there will be a lot of ambiguity about the scope as well as new technologies getting used in the project. Then still during the early phases of an EPC project, we can go with agile, And definitely for IT related projects and R&D based projects, definitely agile is a good option. So what is a product? A product is a vehicle to deliver value. It has a clear boundary, known stakeholders, and well-defined users or customers. A product could be a service, a physical product, or something more abstract. So when we really look at the product cycle, everything starts as a question mark, as an idea. Then organizations pump in money into it. Then slowly that product will bring in some revenue. Then it becomes a star. And after some time, the stars will move on to the cash cows. The product becomes successful, that brings in a lot of money. Then that becomes a cash cow, and over a period of time you pump it into it'll become a dog. That means it is end of life. So if you take a company like Apple today, what are the question marks? Maybe the Apple car, which is an emerging product, that is still a question mark. And what are the star products? Maybe Apple Watch is a star product because that is fairly new in their portfolio. And what are the cash cow? Apple Mac and iPhone, everything is a cash cow. And what are the dogs? Maybe iPod has become a dog because they are not investing anymore into it. So agile is it comes in very handy when the project is a question mark or a star, and when they move from question mark to star, we can expect a lot of additional requirements, and when they move from stars to cash cows also, we see a lot of new requirements coming in, multiple versions happening, releases happening. But then the moment it is about to cross the boundary from cash cow to dog, then the requirements can become very stable. So this is the cycle for new product development. We got it from the Boston Consulting Group. So thanks to them. So this is a good framework to position your product. Any new product development, we can expect changes, rapid changes. So it is better to go with agile than waterfall. What is Scrum? Scrum is the most popular framework among the agile frameworks like XP, DSDM, TDD, FDD, Scaled Agile, etc. This is the most popular one and easy to use and understand. Developed by Ken Scriver and Jeff Sutherland in the early 1990s, so it is not something new. It was there from the year 1990. I was fortunate to get introduced to this maybe around 15 years back when I was working for a product company. The first version of the Scrum Guide was released in the year 2010. It can be applied to various domains. Scrum is a lightweight framework, helps people, teams, and organizations generate value through adaptive solutions for complex problems. So, Scrum is not only meant for simple projects. This is proven in large complex projects comprising of a 700 member teams, 800 member teams working from different locations and contributing to the project. And here we have Jeff Sutherland and Ken Squaber, who are the founders of Scrum, and they are still active in their work. Now it is time to take a pause and then do the quiz by clicking on the link or the card coming on top. You click on it, then you complete the quiz, and then you close the quiz. Then you can come back to uh, this lesson and continue from here. I hope you completed the quiz one very comfortably. Now let us move forward. So what is Scrum? Now here we have the Scrum overview. So we start with the product backlog. Product backlog is nothing but the wish list of features that may or may not get into the product. This is maintained by the product owner. As and when the product owner gets a probable feature, he makes an entry into the product backlog. Typically, it's all one-liners indicating that feature that he feels is, would be nice for the product. So his product backlog is allowed to grow indefinitely and it is maintained by the product owner. Uh, it is a wish list of features. That means the entries in the product backlog may or may not get into the product. So prioritization, validation, all those things happens later. This is just capture. And the basic tool that is being used commonly are Excel sheets or spreadsheets. Then the product owner, the scrum master, and the team gets into the sprint planning meeting, which is an 8-hour planning meeting for the 30-day sprint. There, the product owner proposes a set of features to be developed during the sprint. Then the team discusses, debates, estimates, and converges. And towards the end, they have a plan to make it possible, and that we call as the sprint backlog. The sprint backlog contains the goal of the sprint, and it contains the features to be developed, and maybe they are further broken down into stories and activities and all those things and their estimates, and the team agrees to it. Then the team gets into the sprint. It's the self-organizing team. They start building the feature during the sprint, and the Scrum Master is there basically to help the teams to remove any impediments they are facing. And every day there is a daily team meeting, which is known as daily Scrum. There is a 15 minutes quick meeting where the team discusses three things, like each member of the team says things like, what did I do yesterday, what am I doing today, and what are the challenges I'm facing. So this is shared by the rest of the team. This quick 15 minutes meeting, that means each team member will get maybe approximately 1 minute or maximum 2 minutes. We're talking about 10-member teams. Then at the end of the sprint, maximum the sprint duration is stipulated at 30 days. There are teams which runs weekly sprints or fortnightly sprints or monthly sprints. And at the end of the sprint, we conduct a sprint review meeting, which is attended by the product owner, the scrum master, and the team, and any other stakeholder who wants to attend. They're welcome. And the sprint is evaluated based on the predefined definition of done and the acceptance criteria. And if all the features are through, then we say the sprint is successful. Otherwise, the sprint is a failure. Then after that, the team gets into a sprint retrospective meeting, where it's a 3-hour meeting. The sprint review is around 4 hours meeting, and the sprint retrospective is approximately 3 hours meeting, where they discusses about what are things we did right and what are the things we could have which needs improvement. Those aspects are discussed, and with the added learning, they come back and then plan the subsequent sprint. So this is the Scrum overview. Now the training topics, we'll be covering the definition of Scrum, the theory part, the values, the team, events, and the artifacts. Definition of Scrum. Scrum is a lightweight framework. It helps people, teams, and organizations to generate value, adaptive solutions to complex problems. So it provides an adaptive solution to solve complex problems and it is purposefully incomplete. Sorry. That means Scrum can act as a wrapper to include any other best practice deemed good by the team for the benefit of the product. So this is the what we are discussing today. They are the minimum set of things you can do, but the Scrum framework is open to include other best practices also if the team feels that it is going to really help the success of the sprint and the product. The theory and values. Scrum is founded on empiricism and lean thinking. It is iterative and incremental approach. The empirical Scrum pillars are transparency, inspection, and adaptation. And the Scrum values are commitment, focus, openness, respect, and courage. Founded on empiricism. At any point in time, the Scrum is driven by data. For example, the product backlog, if we add, it must be estimated, and if you add up all the features, we should have some sort of mechanism to say this is the total weightage for all the features. Out of that, at any point in time, we should know how much is done and how much is yet to be done, how much is work in progress, and to complete the balance, okay, how much more effort is required, is there any risk involved? So everything, Scrum is a highly disciplined framework, which is simple, yet it's very disciplined, and everything is driven by data. And it is iterative and incremental. So the sprint represents the iteration, and at the end of the sprint, the product is incremented little more. Whatever features that is included in the sprint that gets built. So the product is also incremented sprint after sprint. And this empiricism brings in transparency. It allows for inspection and adaptation. And the Scrum values, basically we need a highly committed team. The moment we are talking about self-organizing team, then it has to be a highly committed team, highly focused team, because they should not be focusing on things outside the sprint. It must be open, there must be mutual respect and self-respect, and people should be able to make some courageous, challenging decisions, especially while doing the estimates and stuff like that. Then the Scrum team, it is a small group of people. Always the team size is less than 10. And it includes the Scrum Master, the Product Owner, developers, and the teams are cross-functional and self-managing. When I say cross-functional, there can be people with testing capabilities, there can be people with coding capabilities, there can be people with architectural capabilities, but everybody is known as a developer. Sometimes the team may include software guys as well as hardware guys. So there is an example of a cross-functional team. They all work together to deliver value to the organization. And it is self-managing. The moment we say self-organizing team, basically in waterfall, we are talking about command and control teams. Here, the team self-organizes. That means the team is capable of working without the direct supervision of a boss. They can make their own decisions and proceed. And the entire team is responsible for stakeholder collaboration, verification of work, maintenance, operations, experimentation, and any other. And the team has a collective responsibility. If the sprint is successful, the entire team is responsible for it. If the sprint fails also, the entire team is responsible for it. So that is about the team. Now let us discuss about the developers. Everybody in the team except the product owner and the scrum master is known as a developer. They are responsible for creating a plan for the sprint. That is the sprint backlog we already discussed. and instilling quality by adhering to definition of done. What is the definition of done? That is very critical for the success of Scrum. A common understanding or a common norm to say that the piece of work is completed in all aspects. We call it as definition of done. For example, if it is a software development team, a good definition of done is nobody will work on it again. That means it is complete in all aspects. For example, if it is software, coding must be completed, code reviews must be completed, code review incorporation must happen, unit testing must be completed, system integration testing must be completed, system testing must be completed, code reviews must be completed. So only then we should be able to say that it is done. Otherwise, the team may have different definitions of done. Then it is a problem because we may get illusion of progress if the definition of done is not very accurate and strong. Then adapting their plan each day toward the sprint goal. The team should, especially along with the daily Scrum meeting, the team should evaluate their progress within the sprint and make fine tuning what that is required to complete the sprint on time. Basically, we use burn down chart and burn up charts and all those things to track the progress. Then the team holds each other accountable as professionals. If somebody is lagging behind, others have the right to point it out and maybe go and help him out, because it is the collective responsibility to make the sprint successful. Now, the product owner. Product owner owns the product. Product owner is responsible for maximizing the value of the product by developing and communicating the product goal, defining, prioritizing the product backlog items, making product backlog transparent to other stakeholders. Product owner is one person, not a committee. That is very important. The entire organization must support the product owner, can delegate but remain accountable. The product owner owns the product. The product owner owns the product backlog. The product owner prioritizes and refines the backlog continuously. He owns the product. Product owner has to be a single individual, not a committee. So that is very important. Now, Scrum Master. Scrum Master is accountable for establishing Scrum as defined in the Scrum Guide. The fundamental job of a Scrum Master is to ensure that the project is following Scrum and train others, Scrum theory and practice, and true leaders who serve the team and organization. When we say serve the team, Scrum Master is a servant leader. The Scrum Master is a servant to the team. That means if the team is facing any issue which is preventing them from moving forward, the Scrum Master should pitch in immediately and solve or remove that impediment for the team so that their progress is not prevented. Scrum Master service to the team, coaching the team in self-management and cross-functionality, helping the Scrum team focus on the iteration, causing the removal of impediments, ensuring that all Scrum events take place and are positive, productive, and kept within the time box. Now, Scrum Master service to the product owner, find techniques for effective product goal definition, find techniques for effective product backlog management, helping the team understand the need for clear and concise product backlog definitions, helping to establish empirical product planning, and facilitating stakeholder collaboration. See, very often what I've seen is in projects, the product owner may be highly good in the functional side and at the same time need not be very technical. At that time, the Scrum Master should help the product owner in finding the right tools for product backlog maintenance, product backlog refinement, estimation, and things like that. Then Scrum Master service to the organization, leading, training, and coaching the organization in its Scrum adoption. Very often, it is not just the team which needs to be trained. We need to give orientation to other stakeholders as well, especially the middle management and the senior management, so that they really understand how Scrum works. The Scrum Master has a major role to play there, and planning and advising Scrum implementations within the organization. So maybe you are an early adopter of Scrum, your team is an early adopter of Scrum. That means we can really add value to the organization by going around and helping other teams also to implement Scrum, because you have that early starter advantage. Then helping employees and stakeholders understand and enact an empirical approach to complex work and removing barriers between stakeholders and Scrum teams. So there's a handful of opportunities for the Scrum Master. Now it is time for the quiz 2. So please click on the link here and do this quiz number 2. And once you complete the quiz number 2, close that window and you'll come back to the video and we'll proceed from this point onwards. Hi, I presume that you have completed quiz number 2. Now let us proceed further. Let us take a look at the Scrum events. Basically, the Scrum events are sprint planning meeting, sprinting, daily Scrum, sprint reviews, and the sprint retrospectives. So after the product backlog, we get into a sprint planning meeting. Output is the sprint backlog. Then the team work on the sprint backlog during the sprint, and every day they have a daily Scrum. And at the end of the sprint, there is a sprint review. And after the sprint review, the team conducts a sprint retrospective meeting. So that is the sequence. Let us take a closer look at the sprint. Each sprint is a short project of maximum 30 days duration. So it has a planning, it has execution, it has monitoring and controlling, it has closing. So it is the heartbeat of Scrum. Ideas are turned into value. Fixed duration event, less than 30 days. So the maximum duration of the sprint is 30 days. So you can even run 15 days sprints, but the only thing is sprint after sprint, the duration should remain the same. You should not change it without any valid reason. A new sprint starts immediately after the completion of a sprint. Focus is on the sprint goal. Quality does not decrease. That means the definition of done must be adhered in every sprint. The product backlog is refined as needed. Scope may be clarified and renegotiated with the product owner during the sprint. So during the sprint, if the team needs clarifications, they can go back to the product owner, and the product owner is supposed to clarify all their doubts, not only in the planning meeting, but during the sprint as well. So the product owner's availability must be ensured. Otherwise, the team's work will be negatively affected. Let us take a look at the sprint planning meeting. This lays out the work to be performed in the sprint, collaborative planning by the team. Why the sprint is valuable? The sprint goal must be defined first. What can be done during the sprint, that is decided. How will the chosen work get done during the sprint? That also must be decided. And decompose the product backlog into smaller pieces of work, that is 1 to 2 days. Output of the sprint planning is sprint backlog and contains sprint goal, prioritize product backlog, and plan for delivering them together. So typically in a sprint planning meeting, the product owner proposes the features that must be included in the sprint and gets into a dialogue mode with the team, with the developers, and they get into a consensus mode saying that, okay, oh, this many things can be confidently developed during the sprint by considering the previous track record and velocities and all those things. Then the team decomposes that into smaller pieces, estimates, does the capacity checks, and agrees. This is exactly what happens in a sprint planning meeting. Maximum duration 8 hours. For shorter sprints, the planning meeting can be shorter, but maximum duration of the planning meeting for a 30-day sprint is 8 hours. And next event is the daily Scrum, which is nothing but the daily stand-up meeting. The daily meeting to inspect the progress to the sprint goal, 15 minutes meeting for developers held at the same time and same place. That makes it easier. The product owner and the scrum master can participate as developers if they are working on some item. Even if they are not working, they can attend these meetings. Only thing is they should keep quiet because they should not hijack those meetings because it is not their meeting. Three things are discussed: what did I do yesterday? What am I doing today? And what are the challenges I'm facing? Each developer explains these things to the rest of the team, so that the entire team gets to know what the status of the sprint on a day-to-day basis. And if somebody needs some help, others can volunteer and then do that as well. The key thing to be considered here is you should not convert this into an issue resolution meeting. That means you will not be able to complete it in 15 minutes time. So issue resolution meetings, if required, you can call separate meetings, but don't make it part of this meeting. Then the next is the sprint review. So at the end of the sprint, we get into a sprint review meeting to inspect the outcome of the sprint, determine the future adaptations. The Scrum team presents the results to the stakeholders. Scrum team and stakeholders review the team's work during the sprint and collaborate on what to do next. 4 hours for 1 month sprint. If the sprint duration is 30 days, the sprint review can be 4 hours, otherwise, it can be shorter than that. Then, sprint retrospective, which is the last event or the last ceremony in a sprint. So, during the sprint retrospective, the objective is to plan ways to increase quality and effectiveness, inspects how the last sprint went with respect to individuals, interactions, processes, and tools, and definition of adherence to definition of done, and what went well and why, what went wrong and why, how the problems were or were not solved. Apart from daily Scrum, developers can have other meetings also, and it's a 3 hours for a 30-day sprint. So, sprint retrospective meeting is basically a lessons learned meeting where we discuss about what all things we did right, what all things went wrong, and how can we improve further in the subsequent sprints. So that is the objective of the sprint retrospective meeting, which happens to be the last event or ceremony within the sprint. Now it is time for quiz number 3. So you click on the link here, go and click on that, and then complete this simple quiz, and then close the window, come back here, and we proceed from here. I hope you could complete quiz 3 very comfortably, and now let us proceed further. Now let us discuss about the artifacts. The key artifacts are the product backlog, the sprint backlog, the product increment. So these are the key artifacts of Scrum. So let us try to understand these things in detail. Now, every artifact, there is a goal associated with it. Now, the product backlog, which constitute the entire product, it must help us to achieve the product goal. So, the product backlog is linked to the achievement of the product goal. The sprint backlog is linked to the achievement of the sprint goal, and the increment is supposed to adhere to the definition of done. So each artifact here has a goal to meet: product backlog, product goal, sprint backlog, sprint goal, and the increment, it must be according to the definition of done. Now let us go deep into the product backlog. The product backlog is an emergent ordered list of what is needed to improve the product. So it is emergent, it is continuously growing. When the product backlog is not growing, there is an indication that the product is reaching end of life. It is a single source of work undertaken by the Scrum team. The Scrum team will not do anything which is not there in the product backlog. The product backlog refinement is act of breaking down and further defining product backlog items into smaller, more precise items. We call it as product backlog refinement or product backlog grooming. That is done by the product owner. Sometimes the team also gives inputs. So primarily the product backlog gets sliced into smaller pieces, and sometimes we merge smaller pieces to make some meaning out of it. So it is continuously refined. And attributes often vary with the domain of work. Sometimes, if it is depending on the domain of work, maybe let us say the unit or weightage. Maybe sometimes it can be Fibonacci series, it can be story points, it could be something, it could be function points, it could be something else also, depending on the domain of the project. The developers who will be doing the work are responsible for the sizing. The product goal is product the product goal is in the product backlog. The product goal is the long-term goal for the team. The team should work towards the single product goal. So the product goal must be very clear, and the team must work towards that product goal. When we say team, it includes the Scrum Master, the product owner, and the developers. Then comes the sprint backlog. The sprint backlog is composed of the sprint goal. Why are we doing the sprint? What should we accomplish at the end of the sprint? Now, the set of product backlog items selected for the sprint, that is what need to be done, and an actionable plan for delivering the increment. How are we going to achieve this sprint goal? And the sprint backlog is a plan by and for the developers. So it is done, it is a plan for the developers, created by the developers, because we are talking about self-organizing teams here. It is a highly visible, real-time picture of the work that the developers plan to accomplish during the sprint in order to achieve the sprint goal, defined and included in the sprint backlog. Sprint backlog is updated throughout the sprint as more is learned, and it should have enough detail that they can inspect their progress in the daily Scrum. So we're talking about empiricism. So even within the sprint, we should quantify things so that we will know, or we can measure the progress against the plan. The generally commonly used tools here is the burn down chart, sprint burn down chart. Then the product increment, which is the output of the sprint. Concrete stepping stone towards the product goal. So at the end of the sprint, an increment of the product is built. That's why we are saying it is a concrete stepping stone towards the product goal. Each increment is integrated to previous increments. Uh, so let's say we are in sprint number 7, completion of sprint number 7, and we should ensure that the output of sprint 7 is working well with the product we built till the end of sprint 6. So backward integration is very, very important. Otherwise, your definition of done will not have much value. All increments must work together. The increment must be usable. It should provide value. Multiple increments may be created within a sprint. So 30-day sprint, we can define milestones like by this date, this much increment, by this date, it must be incremented further. So within a sprint, we can define multiple increments. Increment may be delivered to stakeholders prior to the end of the sprint itself. You can give demos. You need not wait till the end of the sprint to show the increments to the stakeholders. If you can show them even before, we can collect inputs, feedback from them, which is good for the product. So as and when it is ready, even a part of the sprint increment, we can give a demo and collect feedback. That is good for the product. Sprint review is never a gate for releasing value, so don't wait for the sprint review to release or demo to people. Only those work meeting the definition of done is considered as part of the increment. So we must ensure that the definition of done is adhered to. So now you can see that Scrum is giving a lot of weightage or emphasis for definition of done. Without a proper definition of done and without adherence to the definition of done and without empiricism to see the progress, there is no Scrum. We'll have only ceremonies, but then we will not get the benefit out of Scrum without bringing in empiricism and strict adherence to definition of done. The definition of done is a formal description of the quality measures required. The moment a product backlog item meets the definition of done, an increment is born. If a product backlog item does not meet the definition of done, it cannot be released or even presented at the sprint review. Instead, it returns to the product backlog for future consideration. So, something that has not met the definition of done should not be released. It has to go back to the product backlog and it may get included in the subsequent sprints. Now it is time for quiz number 4. So I presume that you have completed the quiz number 4 successfully. Now let us get into the last leg of this training. The Scrum summary, everything starts with the product backlog, which is a wish list of features which may or may not get into the product, maintained by the product owner. Then the product owner, the entire team gets into a sprint planning meeting where the product owner proposes some of the prioritized features to be completed in the next sprint, and they get into a 7 to 8 hours sprint planning meeting for a 30-day sprint. At the end of the sprint planning meeting, you will have a sprint backlog, agreed upon sprint backlog coming out, which will have a sprint goal, the features to be developed, maybe the features further decomposed into activities estimated, and a plan of action to build it. So everything put together forms the sprint backlog. And the team self-organizes and they get into the sprint trying to convert these backlog items into a product increment. And while doing so, there is a daily scrum, which is a daily meeting where three things gets discussed. What did I do yesterday? What am I doing today? And what are the challenges I'm facing? This is a developers meeting. Others can come and witness it, but they are not allowed to talk. Then at the end of the sprint duration, which is stipulated at 30 days or lesser, the sprint review happens. The product increment is demonstrated against the acceptance criteria, and whatever has not met the definition of done should not be presented here. It will go back to the product backlog, and after all the stakeholders, relevant stakeholders can participate in the sprint review. If all the items are meeting the definition of done and the predefined acceptance criteria, then we deem the sprint as successful. Otherwise, the sprint is a failure. Then we move on to the sprint retrospective meeting, which is the last activity or the last ceremony in Scrum, where we discussed about what all things we did right and what all things we did wrong. So this is a very simple framework based on empiricism, self-organization, trust, risk-taking, transparency by motivated team. So there is no partial Scrum. So either you implement it fully or you don't implement it. There is no partial implementation of Scrum because all these elements put together gives you the benefit. No point in doing it partially. It must be implemented completely. Scrum will act as a container for additional practices. Means you want to bring in earn value management into Scrum, that is perfectly okay. You want to bring in video meetings into Scrum, that is perfectly okay. You want to do a requirements workshop to the team by the product owner before the start of the first sprint itself, that is perfectly okay. So what we discussed here is the stock Scrum as defined by Ken Squaver and Jeff Sutherland. And you can bring in anything additional around it, plug into it, which will add value to the whole process. But don't bring in a lot of traditional project management stuff into this because the beauty of this is in its simplicity. By adding too many things on top of it, like too many metrics and stuff like that, we'll be losing that agility. So slightly, even if they give these elements, use it wisely. Otherwise, after some time, there will not be any difference between a waterfall and agile. So that sustainability of agility is not by adding too many things, is by removing unwanted things which are not adding value. So that is the essence of lean as well. So if you now you have completed all the quizzes, I presume. Now, if you want to get a certificate issued by Scrum Alliance and the Project Management Research Institute together, all you need to do is you scroll down into the description part of this video, and there is a link. You click on that link, and you will get a 25 questions based assessment. You can do it multiple times. So you just complete it, and if you score around 80%, maybe you should try multiple times till you score 80%. Then you can request for a certificate, and we will email you the certificate as well. And please suggest this training to your friends, colleagues, and contacts who can benefit from this particular training. Thank you very much for watching.